My name is Jake, and if ever there lingered even a flicker of uncertainty regarding my precise standing within the intricate tapestry of my family dynamics, every last vestige of that doubt was obliterated, utterly and irrevocably, on the day I stumbled upon the truth about their last will and testament. There was no grand family meeting, no somber sit-down revelation where my parents, with heavy hearts and carefully chosen words, delivered the news themselves. Nothing so dignified or intentional. No, my discovery was entirely accidental, a cruel twist of fate brought about by what could only be described as sheer, dumb, and ultimately devastating luck. It all transpired a mere few months ago, while I was at their house, the very same house that, for the better part of the last 5 years, I had been diligently and unceasingly helping them finance. The mortgage payments, the sporadic yet essential grocery runs that kept their pantry stocked, even the constant, nagging repairs and maintenance tasks around the aging property. It was I, Jake, who had been the unseen, unacknowledged pillar, the silent force painstakingly holding their entire domestic world together. All the while, my younger brother, Eric, existed in a state of blissful, unwavering inertia, contributing absolutely nothing. And when I declare nothing, I mean it in the most literal, unequivocal sense of the word. No discernible job, no shred of financial responsibility, no contribution to household chores, just an unending cycle of lounging, waiting, and expecting life to present itself to him on a gleaming silver platter. A expectation. It became painfully clear that my parents were only too eager, too willing, and too happy to perpetually fulfill. On that particular day, I was once more immersed in the familiar chore of assisting my dad with a mountain of paperwork. Because, as was their established pattern, neither of my parents possessed the inclination, the patience, or frankly, the basic wherewithal to navigate the complexities of such administrative tasks themselves. He had casually requested that I scan a considerable stack of documents for him, a jumble of legal forms, bank statements, and various financial records. I hadn't given it a second thought, mechanically feeding page after page into the scanner, until a sudden, almost involuntary sigh escaped me. My gaze, momentarily unfocused, landed on a distinctively labeled folder resting innocently amidst the pile, estate plan and last will and testament. Now let me be clear, I am not, by nature, a snoop. My inclination is generally to respect boundaries and avoid prying. But at that precise moment, an overwhelming surge of curiosity, potent and irresistible, utterly consumed me. After all, I had been the steady hand, the reliable provider ensuring a roof remained firmly over their heads. Was it truly so outlandish to feel a burning desire to understand how their future, and implicitly, mine, was being structured, given my profound and sustained involvement? My hand, seemingly of its own volition, reached out. I opened the folder, and that's when I saw the words. The words that, with the stark simplicity of their declaration, made my stomach clench into a tight, agonizing knot, sending a sickening wave of nausea washing over me. Every single thing, and I mean every single thing of value, the very house I had been subsidizing, their meticulously accumulated life savings, all their tangible assets, their entire worldly inheritance, was earmarked, without exception, for Eric. Not a single explicit mention of me, nothing beyond a generic, almost insultingly bland line about their purported equal love for both of their sons. Yeah, sure, I thought, the bitterness rising like bile in my throat. Equally. That's precisely why they had gone to such extraordinary lengths to ensure their golden child, their perpetually coddled darling, would inherit the entirety of their estate, while the son who had literally, unequivocally, and consistently kept them financially afloat, didn't even merit a fleeting footnote, a mere afterthought in the grand scheme of their future planning. I felt like an utter fool, a pathetic, exploited, and utterly disregarded idiot. Here I was, metaphorically bending over backward, contorting myself into impossible shapes, sacrificing my own financial stability and peace of mind for them. I had meticulously ensured their bills were paid precisely on time, that they never once had to grapple with the gnawing anxiety of food insecurity or the looming dread of foreclosure. All the while, they sat back, comfortable in their oblivious entitlement, meticulously charting a future in which I was explicitly, definitively, and utterly cut out. And Eric, he wasn't merely lazy. That was too mild a descriptor. He was profoundly, fundamentally entitled. He had never once, not in his entire 28 years of existence, lifted a single finger to genuinely assist them, never contributed a solitary dime to the household economy, never shouldered any adult responsibility. Yet, he had somehow, through some dark, insidious alchemy, managed to convince them, to brainwash them, into believing he deserved it all. Perhaps it was because he was the younger son, forever imbued with that inherent vulnerability and need. Perhaps it was simply because they had always, instinctively and irrationally, babied him, indulged his every whim since birth. Or perhaps, most chillingly, it was because he possessed an innate, almost predatory, understanding of precisely how to manipulate their emotions, to pull at their heartstrings with practiced ease. Whatever the twisted, irrational justification, they had made their choice. And that choice had left me utterly bereft. I remained seated there, transfixed, my gaze locked onto the stark, unforgiving words on the paper. My hands, despite my efforts to control them, trembled uncontrollably. A violent tremor born from a toxic cocktail of white, hot rage and soul-crushing betrayal. How long had this been their secret plan? Had they always intended for me to serve as their endlessly convenient, perpetually free financial safety net, with absolutely no reciprocation, no recognition, no future reward whatsoever? Had they ever, even for a fleeting moment, truly appreciated the immense sacrifices I had made, the emotional and financial drain I had willingly endured on their behalf? The questions swirled in my mind, a chaotic tempest of disbelief and hurt. I had no concept of the passage of time, lost in the vortex of my reeling thoughts. But eventually, my dad, re-entering the room, noticed my inexplicable stillness, the abrupt cessation of the scanner's rhythmic hum. "Hey, Jake, what's taking so long?" he asked, his voice laced with an unconscious impatience, a subtle undertone of expectation that I should be more efficient, less prone to delay. He approached the desk, his eyes scanning the documents. I didn't even bother to conceal the will. There was no point. The truth, in all its devastating clarity, was now laid bare. I simply held the document up, my hand steady despite the internal tremor, and looked him directly in the eye. My voice, to my own surprise, was unnervingly calm, almost detached, a deceptive quietude that belied the volcano of emotion raging within me. "So, this is how it is, then." I enunciated each word slowly, deliberately. "Everything to Eric. After every single thing I've done for you, for this house, for this family." My dad's face, for a fleeting second, drained of all color, turning a ghastly shade of pale. A flicker of something that resembled guilt, or perhaps just discomfort, crossed his features. But then, almost instantly, it vanished, replaced by a sigh laden with the wary resignation of a parent dealing with a petulant child, as if I were some little kid throwing an entirely unreasonable tantrum. "Jake, it's not what you think," he mumbled, his gaze flitting away from mine, avoiding direct confrontation. "Really?" I snapped back, the deceptive calm in my voice shattering, replaced by a sharp, cutting edge. "Because it looks pretty damn clear to me, Dad. Crystal clear, in fact. I've been diligently paying your mortgage. I've been helping with groceries. I've been fixing this house up piece by painstaking piece, all while Eric does absolutely nothing. And yet, despite all of that, you still decided he's the only one who truly matters, the only one worthy of your legacy." Dad shifted uncomfortably, his hands instinctively going into his pockets, a familiar nervous gesture. But instead of offering any actual explanation, any semblance of a justification. He merely muttered, "It's complicated." That was it. Two utterly useless words, no apology, no attempt to explain the glaring inequity, no desperate plea for understanding, just a weak, flimsy excuse, delivered with an expectant look, as if he anticipated that I would simply absorb this profound betrayal, drop the contentious topic, and seamlessly revert to my designated role as their personal, ever-available ATM. A part of me, a screaming, outraged part, urged me to walk out right then and there, to sever all ties, to unleash the full force of my righteous indignation. But another part, a smaller, more desperate part, still clung to a sliver of hope, a desperate need for absolute confirmation. I wanted to hear it from both of them. I needed to see their collective resolve, their unified decision. So, I raised my voice, calling out for my mom. When she eventually drifted into the room, her eyes immediately zeroed in on the will clutched in my hands. Her reaction, while subtly different from Dad's, was not significantly better. She at least had the basic decency to look visibly guilty, her shoulders slumping slightly, her gaze flickering away from mine. But the words that then spilled from her lips, delivered with an almost sickening gentleness, caused my blood to boil with a ferocity that threatened to consume me. "Jake, honey," she began, her voice soft, almost saccharine, as if she were imparting a profound, benevolent wisdom. "You don't need the inheritance." She actually phrased it as if she were doing me a favor, absolving me of some burden. "You have a good job, you're independent. Eric, well, he struggles. We just want to make sure he's taken care of." That was the precise, defining moment. The moment something fundamental, something deep within me, finally and irrevocably snapped. They weren't even attempting to deny it. They weren't scrambling for a cover story, or trying to spin an elaborate lie. They knew precisely what they were doing, and in their twisted, self-serving logic, it was not only completely justified but inherently noble. They had spent years, an entire lifetime, systematically enabling Eric's pervasive laziness, his chronic irresponsibility, his utter dependence. And now, they were not only planning to reward that deeply ingrained parasitic behavior by handing him everything but, in doing so, were simultaneously tossing me aside, discarding me like a used tissue, an utterly irrelevant afterthought in their grand design. I took a slow, deliberate, incredibly deep breath, trying to rein in the tempest of emotions, to prevent myself from saying or doing something I might later regret. I clenched my jaw so tightly I could feel the muscles ache. And then, with a chilling calmness that felt alien even to myself, I set the will down gently on the table. My voice, when I spoke, was eerily calm, devoid of any discernible emotion, a flat, almost robotic monotone. "Got it." I articulated, each syllable distinct, glad to know exactly where we stand, and where I stand. Then, without another word, without a backward glance, I turned and walked out of the house. I ignored their belated, startled protests, their sudden, panicked calls of my name. As I pulled the door shut behind me, not just closing it, but slamming it with a resonant, definitive thud that echoed through the sudden silence. They had made their decision. Now it was unequivocally time for me to make mine. I didn't return to their house after that. Not a single visit. Not a single phone call. Not a single text message checking in on them. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, for the first time in years of being their ever-present safety net, their unwavering support system, I deliberately and completely disengaged. I let them handle their own damn problems. If something around the house broke down, requiring repair, they could figure it out themselves. If their pantry ran bare, if they needed groceries, they could find their own way to the store, navigate the aisles, and pay for their own provisions. And most crucially, most significantly, if that dreaded mortgage bill arrived, looming large and demanding payment, well, I was unequivocally no longer the one paying it. My wallet, my time, my energy, they were no longer their personal resources to exploit. The silence, a profound and deliberate silence, stretched for approximately 2 weeks. At first, I believe they genuinely assumed my absence was merely a temporary phase, a sulking tantrum that would inevitably dissipate. They likely expected me to cool off, to lick my wounds, and then to come crawling back, contrite and apologetic as I always had. Perhaps they even anticipated an apology from me for the audacious act of daring to question their monumental decision, their deeply ingrained sense of parental entitlement. But as the days relentlessly continued to pass, each one devoid of any word from me, and more significantly, devoid of any incoming financial assistance, you could almost palpably feel the slow, seismic shift in their attitude. The initial complacency began to fray, replaced by a growing unease, a dawning realization that this time, things were fundamentally different. Then, one lethargic afternoon, my phone vibrated with a sharp, insistent buzz. It was a text message. From Dad, the screen illuminated with a stark, cold declaration. The property taxes are due. That was it. No preamble. No. Hey Jake, how have you been? No. We're truly sorry for what happened. No. Really appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. Just a blunt, cold, undeniably transactional message, stripped bare of any personal warmth or familial affection. As if I were still there walking, talking bank account, a limitless financial resource they could tap into at their absolute pleasure, without a moment's hesitation or a shred of gratitude. I stared at the screen for a prolonged moment, a faint, almost sardonic amusement stirring within me at their sheer predictability. They truly, genuinely believed they could simply demand money from me, as if nothing had transpired, as if the earth-shattering revelation of the will, and my subsequent departure, had been nothing more than a minor hiccup. They expected me to seamlessly continue playing my part as their dedicated, ever, reliable financial safety net, even after they had so unequivocally made it clear that I was utterly disposable, a means to an end, easily discarded once my utility was exhausted. With a calm that surprised even myself, I typed out my reply. I'm sure Eric will handle it. I wrote, each letter imbued with a quiet, cutting finality. Since the house is his, and all, it took exactly 5 minutes, not a second more, before my mom's name flashed across my screen. She was calling. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then another text message arrived. This one from Mom, Jake, please don't be like this. We need to talk. Oh, now they wanted to talk. Now that their bills were beginning to pile up, a stark, unwelcome reminder of their looming financial reality. Now that the cold, hard truth of their choices was finally slapping them full in the face. I waited an hour, letting the silence fester, letting them stew in their growing discomfort before composing my response. There's nothing to talk about. I typed, concisely and without emotion. You made your choice. Now you can live with it. I figured that would be the end of our correspondence for the day. I had made my stance crystal clear, set my boundary with unwavering resolve, and there wasn't a single fiber of my being that felt even a flicker of guilt about it. But then Eric, always the catalyst for unnecessary drama, decided to chime in. His text message arrived late that evening, a familiar, unwelcome notification. The second I saw his name pop up on my phone, a sense of wary anticipation settled over me. I knew, with absolute certainty, it was going to be something utterly obnoxious, dripping with his characteristic sense of unearned entitlement. Sure enough, when I opened it, I was greeted with a pure, undiluted distillation of his self-important arrogance. Dude, Eric's text read, "Why are you being such a drama queen? It's not a big deal. Just help them out like you always do." I nearly laughed aloud, a sharp, bitter bark of amusement. Not a big deal. He was actually having the gall, the breathtaking audacity, to act as though I had no legitimate right to be incensed by this monumental betrayal. To him, it was just a minor inconvenience, a temporary lapse in my perpetual service. I typed back, my fingers moving with a deliberate slowness, savoring the impact of each word. "Nah," I wrote, "I think you've got it covered. Since you're the favorite and all." His response was immediate, a flurry of rapid-fire text. "Oh my God." Eric texted, "You seriously mad about the will? Grow up, man. It's just money." Oh, now it was just money. Now that it was conveniently his to inherit, now that the colossal sum was destined for his pockets, it suddenly didn't matter. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it all was utterly astounding. I shot back my retort, cutting straight to the core of his self-serving narrative. "Then you won't mind using some of that money to pay for the mortgage, right?" Silence. A heavy, protracted silence. A few minutes later, my mom texted me again. This time, she had evidently decided to abandon any pretense of subtlety and go full-blown guilt trip mode. "Jake." Her text read, laced with an almost theatrical pathos. "We're your parents. Family takes care of each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're just abandoning us." I had to take another deep, shaky breath, actively clenching my fists, to prevent myself from launching my phone across the room in a fit of pure, incandescent rage. Abandoning them. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it. I had spent years of my life, a significant portion of my young adulthood, meticulously ensuring they never had to struggle, never had to worry about a single financial burden. All the while, they had consciously, deliberately, and consistently coddled Eric, showered him with unearned privileges, and explicitly rewarded his profound laziness. And now that they were finally, justly, having to deal with the inevitable consequences of their own deeply flawed decisions, I was the villain. I was the selfish, ungrateful child. I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. Never again. I responded, my words cold and precise. "You made it clear. I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Now Eric can take care of you." I could almost visualize my mom gasping dramatically at that, her hand flying to her chest in feigned shock and wounded indignation. She always possessed a flair for acting the victim, even when she was demonstrably, unequivocally the one in the wrong. A few minutes later, my dad sent another text, and this final text, had me seething with a fury so profound it felt like a physical ache in my bones. "We're not asking for much," Dad texted, his tone a mix of injured pride and thinly veiled demand. "Just enough to cover the mortgage for a few more months, until we figure things out. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in my mind, a toxic burning ember that ignited the inferno of my rage. Selfish. I had been bailing them out, financially and emotionally, for years. I had willingly sacrificed my own hard-earned money, my precious time, and my finite energy to painstakingly make their lives undeniably easier, more comfortable, more secure. I had performed every single duty, fulfilled every single expectation that a good son was supposedly obligated to do, and then some. And how had they chosen to repay me for this unwavering devotion, this ceaseless sacrifice, by callously ensuring I received absolutely nothing in return? And now, when I was finally, at long last, standing up for myself, establishing a healthy, desperately needed boundary, I was the selfish one. My jaw clenched again so hard it hurt. I took one final, steadying breath and typed back, the words a definitive, unyielding statement of absolute finality. "No, I'm done." Then, with a decisive movement, I turned off my phone, plunging it into a silent, unresponsive oblivion. They had made their choice. Now, they were going to live with it, whether they liked it or not. The ensuing silence lasted a mere day. I knew, with an almost weary certainty, that my parents wouldn't surrender that easily. Their sense of entitlement was far too deeply ingrained, their reliance on me far too pathological. But even with that knowledge, I was utterly unprepared for what unfolded next. The very next morning, I woke up to a peculiar notification on my phone, a bank transfer request. I frowned, a ripple of confusion marring my usually calm demeanor, as I unlocked my phone to investigate. It was from my mom. She had actually, brazenly, sent me a direct request for money, as if I were some readily accessible, endlessly dispensing ATM, a mere machine designed solely for their convenience. The requested amount, a staggering $3,500. I stared at the screen in utter disbelief, a half-laugh bubbling up in my throat, tinged with a bitter irony at the sheer, unmitigated audacity of it all. No accompanying message, no explanation, no apology, just a cold, utterly shameless, bald-faced demand for the precise amount they needed to cover their now overdue mortgage payment. They weren't even asking anymore. They were simply assuming I would cave, that I would fold under the pressure, that I would revert to my familiar role as their financial savior. I declined the request without a moment's hesitation. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone began to ring. It was Mom. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then another text message arrived. Jake, Mom's text read, a faint tremor of desperation now creeping into her words. I know you saw the request. Why did you decline it? I took my time, enjoying the small, defiant victory of making her wait, before finally replying. Because it's not my responsibility. I typed, each word a stone in the foundation of my newfound resolve. Try Eric. Another call came through almost instantly. I declined it. Then yet another text, Jake. Mom pleaded, her previous composure now completely shattered, replaced by an urgent, raw desperation. We're going to lose the house if you don't help us. Oh, now, it was an emergency. Now, after all those years of systematically treating me like a walking wallet, a convenient source of endless funds, now they were finally, truly facing the painful, tangible consequences of their decades of enabling and their recent act of profound betrayal. I typed back my words carefully chosen, devoid of any genuine empathy. Maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I didn't matter. A few seconds later, Dad chimed in, his text message attempting a new, even more blatant form of emotional manipulation. Jake, he wrote, you're really going to let your parents become homeless. Well, that particular gambit actually made me laugh out loud. A genuine, full-throated laugh, ringing with a profound sense of dark amusement. The manipulation was so transparent, so utterly devoid of any subtlety, it was almost comical. They weren't actually broke. They weren't on the brink of being thrown onto the streets, condemned to a life of destitution. They just didn't want to dip into their own substantial savings, their meticulously hoarded nest egg, because they were so irrevocably accustomed to me, covering every single expense, shielding them from any financial inconvenience whatsoever. I ignored their increasingly frantic calls and texts for the remainder of the day. That night, just as I was preparing for bed, I received a text from Eric. Dude, he wrote, the message dripping with exasperation. Just send them the money already. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. I clenched my jaw, a fresh wave of irritation washing over me. This entitled, parasitic little prick, who had never worked a day in his life, actually thought he had the right, the moral authority, to lecture me on the severity of the situation. I typed back, my words sharp and pointed. You mean the same money you're inheriting? Why don't you send it? His response came back with startling speed, a clear indication that my retort had struck a nerve. You know I don't have that kind of cash right now. Eric texted, his indignation palpable even through the screen. Oh, so for now it was about affordability. He was perfectly fine with me draining my accounts, sacrificing my own financial security for their sake. But the second it was his turn, the instant the responsibility shifted to him, suddenly he had nothing to offer, nothing to contribute. Wes, you better figure it out then, bro, I replied, a cold finality in my words. You're the one they chose. There was no response after that. I went to bed feeling oddly, wonderfully at peace, as if I had finally, truly, irrevocably broken free from the oppressive chains of years of insidious manipulation. But the next day, things escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. I was at work, immersed in my daily tasks, when my phone vibrated with an incoming call. It was from my apartment's front desk. "Hey, Jake," the voice on the other end, belonging to my building's receptionist, began hesitantly. "Your parents are here." I nearly dropped my phone, my heart leaping into my throat. "What?" I managed to croak, the single word laced with utter disbelief. She hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable, before adding, "They're saying it's an emergency, and that you won't answer their calls." Oh my God. They had actually shown up at my apartment, my private sanctuary, just because I had stopped paying their bills. I took a deep, ragged breath, pinching the bridge of my nose, trying to quell the rising tide of anger and shock. "Please don't let them up," I instructed, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm not expecting them. They're not welcome." There was an awkward, telling pause on the other end. "Oh," she said, her voice betraying a hint of trepidation. "They're being kind of pushy." I clenched my jaw, my resolve hardening into steel. "I don't care," I stated flatly. "They can leave." I hung up the phone, my mind already reeling, and immediately, another text message popped up on my screen. This one from Mom. "We're downstairs." It read, a blunt, imperious command. "Open the door." No question. No explanation. Just another naked demand. I didn't reply. Another text from Mom quickly followed. "Jake," it read, the message tinged with a clear threat of permanence. "We're not leaving until you talk to us." I exhaled sharply, a frustrated gust of air, and stood up from my desk. They weren't going to back down. Fine. If they wanted to play hardball, I was more than ready. I was about to teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. I grabbed my keys, the metal cold and solid in my palm, and stormed downstairs. My blood boiling with a furious intensity. I wasn't scared. Not even a little bit. I was utterly, incandescently furious. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of these people. To show up at my home, uninvited, without so much as a preceding phone call, let alone a half-hearted apology for their past transgressions. To brazenly demand money from me, as if I were some automated teller machine, a public utility they could access at their leisure. It was a full-on ambush, a calculated attempt to corner me into submission, to manipulate me with their physical presence, as if I were some naive, easily intimidated child. I yanked the building's main door open with a force that surprised even myself. And there they were, Mom, Dad, and of course, Eric, all standing in a tight, determined little formation, like a self-righteous delegation, as if they were about to stage a formal family intervention. Mom had her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her classic, disappointed mother look locked and loaded, aimed squarely at me. Dad stood stiffly, his hands jammed into his pockets, his expression a peculiar mix of profound frustration and ingrained entitlement, as if he couldn't quite believe I was actually making him stoop to the indignity of to face confrontation. And Eric, the little leech, had the astonishing nerve to look utterly bored, his eyes vaguely distant, as if this entire, inconvenient situation was nothing more than a mild annoyance, a minor interruption to his otherwise blissful idleness. As if he wasn't the very reason any of this infuriating drama was transpiring in the first place. The moment Mom saw me, she launched into full theatrics, her voice pitched with a dramatic urgency. "Jake, finally, we need to talk." I leaned against the door frame, my own arms crossed in a mirroring gesture, my stance radiating an immovable resolve. My voice was calm, controlled, but imbued with an unmistakable firmness. "No," I stated plainly, "you need to leave." She blinked once, twice, as if she were physically incapable of comprehending the simple words I had just uttered, as if her ears had somehow malfunctioned. "Excuse me?" she managed, her voice laced with incredulity. "You heard me," I reiterated, my voice unwavering, betraying none of the furious maelstrom churning within me. "You don't get to just show up at my apartment, unannounced, demanding money. That's insane." Dad let out a sharp, dismissive scoff, his frustration boiling over. Are you really going to let us lose the house over a petty grudge? He challenged, his voice rising in volume. I let out a cold, humorless laugh, a sound that held no mirth whatsoever. Petty grudge. I echoed, the words dripping with sarcasm. Oh, you mean the one where you decided I was good enough to tirelessly pay your bills, but not good enough to be included in your will. That grudge, the one where I was disposable, a convenient resource, but never family. Mom gasped, a dramatic, performative sound, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her, wounded her to the core. "Jake, that's not fair!" she cried, her voice trembling. "We only did what we thought was best for the family." I tilted my head, my gaze unwavering, holding hers. "Best for the family," I countered, my voice laced with a bitter cynicism. "You mean best for Eric. Just say it. Be honest for once." A long, heavy, suffocating silence descended, pregnant with unspoken truths. Eric, who had until this point remained unusually quiet, surprisingly subdued, finally spoke up, a note of petulance in his tone. "Look, man, I don't even want to be involved in this. I didn't ask for anything." I turned my full attention to him then, finally, utterly letting loose the torrent of repressed anger that had been simmering for weeks. "No," I agreed, each word a hammer blow. "You just sit back, Eric, and take everything that's handed to you. You're 28 years old. 28. Get a damn job. Grow up." His face flushed a furious, mottled red. "Dude, what the hell?" he spluttered, clearly taken aback by my direct assault. I took a step closer, invading his personal space, my voice low, dangerous. "You heard me," I snarled. "You want to inherit the house. Start acting like a homeowner. You want to be the golden child, their precious chosen one. Then start paying their damn bills. I'm done being your personal bank. I'm done supporting your pathetic, entitled existence." Eric looked away, his gaze suddenly, intensely interested in the mundane imperfections of the pavement beneath his feet, utterly unable to meet my furious eyes. Mom took a deep, strategic breath, clearly recalibrating her guilt trip, preparing for another emotional offensive. "Jake," she began, her voice softening, trying to appeal to a forgotten sense of familial duty. "Who's your brother?" I nodded slowly, deliberately. "Yep," I affirmed. "And I've supported him financially for far longer than you ever have, Mom. I've been his de facto parent, his provider, while you enabled his every weakness." Dad's face darkened, a flash of genuine anger replacing his earlier discomfort. "You're being selfish," he accused, his voice booming with what he clearly perceived as righteous indignation. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh this time, tinged with a profound sense of irony and self-awareness. "Oh," I scoffed, gesturing between the two of them with a sweep of my hand. "That's rich. That's where it's coming from. You two decided, unequivocally, that Eric deserved everything, and I deserved nothing. And now that it's time to pay the price for that choice, now that the consequences of your favoritism have finally arrived at your doorstep, you're trying to manipulate me into fixing it for you again. Not happening. Not ever again." Mom's voice sharpened, her patience clearly wearing thin. "We thought you'd be mature about this," she snapped, a thinly veiled accusation in her tone. I raised an eyebrow, a sardonic expression on my face. "Mature?" I questioned. "You mean quietly accept that I was betrayed, disregarded, and exploited, and then just keep on paying your bills like a docile fool? Because let's be realistic, Mom. That's precisely what you wanted. That's your definition of mature." Dad stepped forward, attempting to loom over me, to physically intimidate me as he used to when I was a small, impressionable child. "Jake, we raised you," he thundered, his voice rising in volume. "We fed you, clothed you, gave you everything. The least you can do is help us now, in our time of need." I looked him dead in the eye, unflinching, unyielding. "I already did," I retorted, my voice cutting through his theatrical bluster. "For years, Dad. Years. And you repaid me by callously cutting me out of your future, out of your legacy, out of your very definition of family. Mom's lip trembled, a practiced display of wounded vulnerability. "We thought you'd understand," she whispered, her voice laced with a desperate plea. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head, a deep weariness settling over me. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I corrected her, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "I understand that I was never family to you. Just a paycheck, a convenient, limitless source of funds. Nothing more." Silence again. A heavy, suffocating, undeniable silence, thicker and more potent than any before. I turned my gaze to Eric, who was still pretending, somewhat poorly, to be invisible, his eyes fixed on some distant, imaginary point. "And you?" I challenged him directly. "What's your excuse? You've had years, Eric, years to grow up, to get your life together, to contribute anything of value. But you didn't, because you knew, with absolute certainty, that they'd always take care of you. And when they're gone, you just expected me to step in, pick up the pieces, and continue being your financial guarantor, didn't you?" Eric finally snapped, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "What do you want me to say, man?" He burst out, his voice raw with frustration. "I didn't ask for this!" I nodded slowly, deliberately. "Right." I acknowledged, the word dripping with irony. "You didn't ask. You just conveniently, effortlessly, and ungratefully benefited from it. Always." His mouth opened, then closed again like a fish out of water. Nothing. He had nothing. No comeback. No defense. No shred of genuine remorse or understanding. Mom, ever the persistent manipulator, tried one last, desperate guilt trip. "Jake, we're family," she pleaded, her voice choked with feigned emotion. "Family takes care of each other." I stared at her for a long, agonizing moment, allowing the weight of her words to hang in the air, before finally, definitively, providing my answer. "Exactly." I agreed, my voice cold, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. "So why didn't you take care of me?" She froze, utterly still. No words. No comeback. Nothing. The silence that followed was broken only by my slow, deliberate exhale. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if an enormous, suffocating weight had finally been lifted from my soul. "We're done here?" I stated, the finality ringing in the crisp morning air. I turned and walked back inside, closing the door firmly behind me, leaving them standing there, bewildered and defeated. Before I even made it back to my couch, my phone vibrated with a sharp, insistent buzz. A new text message, from Dad. Wow. It read, laced with wounded indignation. "After everything we've done for you, you're really gonna abandon us?" I smirked, a genuine, satisfied smirk spreading across my face. I typed back, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "No," I wrote. "You abandoned me. I'm just finally accepting it." I hit send. Then, with a profound sense of liberation, I blocked their numbers, all of them. But I had no idea, not then, that merely blocking their numbers was only going to make things worse, exponentially and publicly so. It didn't take long for things to spiral utterly out of control. Less than a full day after I had blocked their numbers, effectively cutting off direct communication, I began to see a disturbing pattern of posts emerging on Facebook. My parents had never been the most technologically savvy individuals, certainly not digital natives, but they possessed a profound and intuitive understanding of precisely how to air their grievances online, how to rally support and paint themselves as victims, especially when they were operating from a place of deeply ingrained, self-righteous indignation. At first, a cynical part of me thought it was simply my parents indulging in their characteristic flair for the dramatic. After all, publicly airing family drama for the entire world to witness was, without a doubt, their go-to move, their preferred method of seeking validation and exerting pressure. But the longer I scrolled through their respective feeds, the more I realized, with a growing sense of dread, that this wasn't merely about me refusing to help with their mounting bills anymore. This was a calculated character assassination. The posts, meticulously crafted to appear as heartfelt expressions of family love, and disappointment were, in truth, thinly veiled, passive-aggressive shots aimed directly and maliciously at me. Mom, in her usual theatrical style, had posted something saccharine yet venomous about how she didn't raise her son to be so selfish, and how true family helps each other, no matter what the circumstances. A few of her ever-loyal friends, predictably, chimed in with comments echoing her sentiments, lamenting how I was a profound disappointment, and so utterly out of touch with what truly matters in life. Then Dad, never one to be outdone in the victim Olympics, chimed in with his own equally manipulative post. So-called family, he declared, should never turn their back when you need them most. We gave everything to our children, sacrificed so much, and this is how we're repaid. He continued, with a particularly galling flourish. My son, who should be helping us in our golden years, has chosen to abandon us. He even had the audacity to tag me directly in the post, adding a passive-aggressive, "I hope you're happy," at the very end. But the real soul-crushing kicker, the ultimate blow, came from Eric. I should have known he wouldn't be able to resist getting in on the drama, to exploit the situation for his own self-aggrandizement. He shared a post, brimming with outright falsehoods and sanctimonious platitudes. Some people, he wrote with a clear, self-important air, think that family is just about money. They don't understand that family is about love and sacrifice. I'd do anything for my parents, absolutely anything, but some people just don't get that. They're too wrapped up in themselves, too self-absorbed, to realize that true love is about helping those who raised you, those who nurtured you. He even, with a particularly nasty flourish, threw in a disguised jab directly at me. I wish some people could learn what it really means to be family. I love my parents, and I'm grateful for everything they've done. That was it. That was the absolute, unequivocal breaking point. I sat there, staring at the glowing screen in utter disbelief, a cold knot of nausea tightening in my stomach. How had it devolved to this point? How had they managed to so thoroughly twist and contort the entire situation, to deftly turn me into the villain, the selfish, ungrateful son who was callously unwilling to support his supposedly sacrificial, long-suffering parents? The son who, according to their warped narrative, didn't appreciate all the boundless love and selfless devotion they had purportedly showered upon me over the years. How could they? How could they lie so blatantly, so unashamedly, to their entire social circle? I had always been the one who worked diligently, the one who contributed consistently, the one who never complained, never asked for anything in return. I had to swallow the bitter, indigestible fact that, somehow, through some twisted logic and profound self-deception, they had genuinely convinced themselves they were in the right. And now, they were not only broadcasting that conviction to everyone they knew but actively, publicly, declaring that I was the sole, unrepentant problem. I didn't want to react immediately. My first instinct was to lash out, to defend myself with furious indignation. But I forced myself to take a step back, to collect my reeling thoughts, to allow the initial surge of raw anger to subside. I waited for a few long, agonizing hours, pacing my apartment, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I wanted to make absolutely certain that I didn't simply rush into something out of unbridled rage, something I might later regret. But the more I replayed their words, their accusations, their public vilification, the more I realized, with a cold, clear certainty, that I simply would not, let them get away with this. If they were determined to drag my name through the mud, to publicly assassinate my character, then I was damn well going to set the record straight for anyone willing to listen. So, with a renewed sense of purpose and a steely resolve, I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, and began to type. I opened my own Facebook account, the one I meticulously maintained for close friends and genuine family members, the one shielded from the prying eyes of casual acquaintances. and I began to compose a lengthy, detailed update. I wasn't interested in playing their petty game of back and forth accusations, of getting bogged down in an endless, undignified squabble. What I wanted, more than anything, was to tell the unvarnished, unembellished truth. Here's what I wrote, each word chosen carefully, deliberately, designed to lay bare the harsh reality of our family dynamic. I know I've been quiet for the past couple of days, deliberately so, but I find that I simply cannot stay silent any longer. My biological family has, for reasons that have become tragically clear, been sharing a lot of things online about me that are simply and unequivocally not true. They've gone to great lengths to portray me as the villain, the selfish, ungrateful son who heartlessly refuses to help my parents in their supposed time of need. I am here now to set the record straight, once and for all. Let me be perfectly clear, I have always, consistently, and without question, helped my family. From the moment I was old enough to get my very first job, I have been the one bearing the financial burdens, actively helping with bills, diligently paying for groceries, and tirelessly supporting them in every conceivable way I could. I have sacrificed my own financial growth, my own peace of mind, for their comfort and security. But there comes a crucial point in any relationship, even a familial one, where you simply cannot keep giving endlessly without receiving a modicum of respect, without being treated as an equal, without your contributions being truly valued. Over the years I have watched, silently and with growing resentment, as my parents consistently, explicitly, and shamelessly favored Eric, showering him with everything: the house, the money, the unwavering attention, the endless indulgence. Meanwhile I, the older son, the responsible one, was simply expected to just keep giving, to keep pouring my resources into their lives, without ever once being genuinely considered as an equal, as someone worthy of their consideration in their long-term planning. I'm sure some of you might be reading this right now and thinking, well, that's just how family works. You help each other, no questions asked. But here's the uncomfortable, inconvenient truth: true family, should be a two-way street. It should be built on mutual respect, reciprocal support, and unconditional love, not on one-sided exploitation. When I found out, entirely by accident, that my parents had chosen to leave absolutely everything, every single asset, every penny, every piece of property to Eric in their last will, it was a brutal, undeniable realization of just how profoundly one-sided, how fundamentally unequal this entire relationship had been for my entire adult life. They didn't even consider me, not for a fleeting moment, not as a backup plan, not as a gesture of acknowledgement. They've now made it abundantly clear that I am merely the one they can unfailingly count on when things get rough, when their financial house of cards threatens to collapse. But I am never the one they actually want around, never the one they truly value for who I am, unless it's convenient for them, unless I can provide something tangible. For years, truly, for years, I've been the primary, often sole, financier of their lifestyle. I've paid for their vacations, chipped in for their countless bills, and even helped out with critical expenses like the house taxes, year after year. And for what I ask? To be treated like a disposable backup plan, to be relegated to the role of an afterthought, a convenient ATM. I'm done. I am not, nor will I ever be again, just some walking wallet they can pull money from whenever they happen to need it. I am a human being. I have a life, a career, dreams, and aspirations of my own. And I deserve respect. I have earned the right to be treated like I matter, like my existence is valued, not just when they need something substantial from me. A's for Eric. My brother, it is long past time for him to grow up. He is 28 years old, a grown man, and he has, to my knowledge, never truly worked a day in his life, never held down a consistent job, never taken genuine responsibility for anything. My parents have enabled him, indulged his every whim, and fostered his chronic dependency for so long that it's no surprise he's the one they unabashedly favor, the one they see as perpetually needing their protection. But here's the thing, he's had plenty of time, more than enough time, to get his life together, to become a contributing member of society. And now, it is unequivocally time for him to stand on his own 2 feet, to face the adult world without my financial scaffolding. To everyone who has been following this unfortunate family drama and, perhaps, supporting my parents' one-sided narrative, you need to understand that there are always 2 sides to every story. Yes, family is incredibly important, a cornerstone of life, but it is also fundamentally about mutual respect, about give and take, about genuine connection, not one-sided exploitation. I have given enough, more than enough, for a lifetime, and I am not, under any circumstances, apologizing for finally taking a crucial step back, for prioritizing my own well-being and self-worth. This is not me turning my back on family, as they claim. This is me finally, unequivocally choosing myself. And to my parents, I truly wish you the best. But I am done being your doormat, your financial lifeline, your emotional punching bag. I hit post, and instantly, an overwhelming, profound sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in my entire life, I was telling the world the unvarnished, unfiltered truth about my family, about how they had systematically taken advantage of me for years, how they had always, relentlessly, expected me to be the one to save them, to clean up their messes, to bail them out, without ever once thinking about what Eve needed, what Eve deserved. I wasn't going to let their self-serving, manipulative narrative control my life anymore. The power, for the first time, was finally mine. The reactions were almost instantaneous. The notifications on my phone began to buzz incessantly. Some people, individuals I hadn't talked to in years, came forward, reaching out to express their profound support and solidarity. A few of my cousins, friends of my parents who had clearly seen through their charade, even some distant relatives who had observed the family dynamics from afar, liked the post, sending me private messages, expressing their profound regret for what I had evidently been forced to endure. It felt incredibly liberating to finally have the truth out there, to see it resonating with others, not buried under layers of manufactured guilt trips and insidious manipulative behavior. But then, as expected, came the inevitable backlash. My parents and Eric, upon seeing my public declaration, went absolutely ballistic. Eric messaged me directly, bypassing my block from a different platform, his words spitting with venom. "You're a traitor," he typed, his fury palpable. "You really had to air all our business out like this. You have no respect for family, for privacy, for anything." Dad called me from an unknown number, his voice practically yelling into the phone, vibrating with raw, unadulterated rage. "You've ruined everything, Jake!" he screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. "You'll regret this! You'll regret cutting us off! You'll regret turning your back on your own family." But I didn't regret it. Not for a single second. Their words, once so potent, now held no power over me. I blocked them all again, on every platform I could access. I was done. And for the very first time in my entire life, I was truly, genuinely free. Free from the toxic, suffocating grip that had held me captive for so long. Free from the crushing weight of their expectations, their manipulation, their entitlement. As the days passed, I could almost physically feel the enormous weight lifting off my shoulders. The air felt lighter, my steps surer. I was done with being treated as less than, as merely a resource to be exploited. I was done with being the one who was always, without question, expected to fix everyone else's problems, to solve their dilemmas, to sacrifice my own life for theirs. And now, at long last, I finally possessed the profound freedom to live my own life, on my own terms, according to my own values, unburdened by their corrosive influence. So, no, I do not feel a single pang of guilt or remorse for cutting them off. I deserved better. I still do. And from this moment forward, I am choosing, deliberately and with unwavering resolve, to surround myself only with people who genuinely appreciate me for who I am, for my inherent worth, not for what I can provide them, not for what they can extract from me. It's time for me to move forward, for good, to build a life based on true respect and reciprocity. And I will. Our optional concluding line, if this were a blog post formatting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.